Welcome back. Panelists here, NBC News Washington correspondent Yamiche Alcindor, Ashley Parker, the senior national political correspondent for the Washington Post, Mark Short, former chief of staff to Vice President Mike Pence, and former White House press secretary Jen Psaki, an NBC News contributor. I should point out, Mark, there is no active presidential campaign for Mike Pence, right?
Correct.
That's right. But you are advising him, and you could be involved.
There's no way that I know where that's going to go, Chuck. But yeah, certainly I've worked with Vice President for 15 years and honored to do so.
Well, I just wanted to get that out there so viewers know on that front. But I'll let you answer the first question here. Donald Trump, what he's done with Kanye West, this Nick Fuentes, what he's done with the Constitution, is this time different?
Chuck, I don't think it's a good platform for a presidential campaign to say that we should just set the Constitution aside. And I feel like we've seen this, I think, digression continue ever since January 6th. And, candidly, as far as putting the Constitution aside, I candidly think that's what he asked the vice president to do 2 years ago when rioters were attacking the Capitol, and he asked the vice president to overturn the election results. And so I think, unfortunately, this has been a consistent trend. Now, I do think that there is concern from many conservatives about the belief about what happened in the Twitter revelation, believing that media has had a double standard here. I mean, I know when Mike Pence was vice president of the United States, his son was getting a paycheck from the government to serve the United States Marine Corps. When Joe Biden was vice president, Hunter Biden was getting tens and tens of thousands of dollars from the communist Chinese and from Ukraine, which was Joe Biden's portfolio. I think there has been a double standard. But the president's remarks, the company he's keeping, I think, is way beyond the fold.
And I think if you look at it also after January 6th, it hits a little differently. In the 2022, the midterms we just had, it wasn't that Democrats won so affirmatively. I was just down at the DGA with these Democratic governors, and even them, where they really are the power center of sort of the next generation, even some of them said, look, I benefited from a pretty mediocre MAGA opponent. But so again, it wasn't that Americans so much voted for them in some cases, but they voted for sanity. And meeting a former president, meeting with a racist, a white nationalist, an anti-Semite, calling to overturn the Constitution is not a particularly sane stance.
Yamiche, people say, we've been here before with him.
Well,
Is this time different?
The fact that we even have to ask that question shows you that there's still this grip that former President Trump has on the party and his popularity among some in the base, these extreme MAGA people who are still supporting him, the fact that they could still win primaries. That to me tells me that there's something to the fact that he could still win the nomination. We've been here before. This feels familiar to me. We were here in the Access Hollywood tape when everyone found out that they had a daughter and a mother and were saying that they didn't want former President Trump to be the nominee. That we were here again after January 6th when we saw people leaving the White House in droves, and then everyone turn around and at least the senators who had the power to say, we're going to convict you in this impeachment, they all decided, actually, this is the line that we're not going to cross. So I think, yes, does it feel different? It feels different because we've been fighting anti-Semitism and racism for a long time. But I still think that it's too early to say whether or not he's completely out of the ability to win this nomination.
I mean, I think Democrats and sane Republicans underestimate Trump at their own peril, because in order for Trump not to win the nomination, there has to be a better alternative. That's how primaries work, right? Ron DeSantis, he's either the savior or he's currently at his peak. Mike Pence, with all due respect, didn't exactly light the world on fire politically before he was selected by Donald Trump to be his running mate. So the question is, who's the alternative? Trump has some evil charisma that helps him win the nomination. The nomination process is long. What is going to happen here, in my view, is people should not underestimate
And
him.
he plays former President Trump plays a weak hand well. That is the thing that has allowed him to continue to,
Everyone's
to
against
be part
me.
of it.
Yeah.
And there's, very briefly, a certain irony that former President Trump is actually underestimating his supporters, right? I mean, he seems to think that the only way he will have the support of his base is if he embraces racism, white nationalism, anti-Semitism. And in fact, I think a lot of his base is the fringe, and that's not actually what's so appealing about it.
Is she right about this?
I think she's right, because I believe that really what a lot of Republicans appreciate was the record. They appreciate that we got record tax reform. They appreciate the record of national security. They appreciate what we did with judges. They appreciate so much of the record, and I think Ashley's right. So often he doesn't actually focus on what he accomplished.
Right. No, it's funny, and in fact, do you find this, that there are people that like the president to say, I don't like his behavior? I mean, that was a constant theme, right?
Sure, absolutely, and I think it's a matter of what are your choices, and I think that in many cases it was we don't like behavior, but we still like the record. But I think we've reached a point where ever since, I agree with Ashley, since January 6th, I do think that was a dividing line for a lot of people.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I actually think the dividing line is not January 6th. The dividing line was the November election when Republicans saw politically that it wasn't advantageous to them to run as election deniers because they lost. It wasn't like there was a loud Republican opposition to January 6th after January 6th. Right. It is now not a good thing to run on. That may be the change.
This brings me to Newt Gingrich, of all people. And let me pull out something he wrote earlier this week. We, referring to Republicans and conservatives, we dislike Biden so much we pettily focus on his speaking difficulties, sometimes strange behavior, clear lapses of memory, and other personal flaws. Our aversion to him and his policies make us underestimate him and the Democrats. The Biden team had one of the best first-term off-year elections in history. Mark, do you agree with his
I do agree, and despite Jen's comment about, Mike Pence having been successfully elected 6 times to the House and as governor, Joe Biden ran for president since the 1980s before he broke through. And the reality is that, I do think we underestimate him. We have consistently underestimated him. I think Newt's exactly right.
I think we should also, I would add to this, which is a little different than focusing on the policy wins for Democrats, which I heard a lot when I was traveling around the country. The Democrats were feeling good about the president's ability to move legislation. We also underestimate Americans being able to push aside racism and anti-Semitism if they feel like they're going to get what they want. This is not the first time we've had a conversation about racism and anti-Semitism. We've had the former president himself use racist language and anti-Semitic language at times, and he's been able to continue to move past that and have the same Republicans who were outraged by a tweet condemn that tweet, but then say, I still like the man. Mm-hmm. So I also think that to me is something that's interesting in our society that we need to look at.
We kind of saw that with Benjamin Netanyahu. He wanted to criticize the behavior, but not everything about Trump.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And even in this latest dinner, right, with Nick Fuentes and Ye, it feels like the easiest thing not even if you're a Republican, just if you're a human, to come out against racism and anti-Semitism, which some of the Republicans did, but some of them did it quite softly, right? They wouldn't have had that dinner themselves. I think among one of the most forceful, actually, we were talking about this, was Mike Pence, who actually said, right, Donald Trump needs to apologize. Now, compare that to some of the people who wouldn't even mention Donald Trump's name.
Hey, before I let you go from this round of the panel, Kevin McCarthy, if he doesn't have the votes, can he be Speaker?
I think he'll have the votes, Chuck. I really do, absolutely. Yeah, he'll be the next Speaker of the House.
You would still take his ticket over Steve Scalise?
I think Kevin McCarthy will be Speaker of the House, for sure.